congratulations for that. Can I ask for how many of you this is the last session of the day? Can you lift up your hands? Yes, so I've asked the organizers to see if they can get us some drinks. We'll see if this is flying. But in the meantime, thank you so much for taking the time and staying with us. We're going to try and make this session as lively as possible to keep everybody awake, but also to make sure that this was a worthwhile investment of your time. So my name is Emmeline Felus. I'm the Senior Director for Agriculture and Food at the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. Indeed, you should take your headsets in order to be able to hear me and everyone afterwards. We're here today to talk about how we're going to finance the agriculture and food transition. Everybody heard that this year's COP was the COP for finance. We're hearing that indeed there is quite a lot of solutions. We're starting to see investors, private, public investment groups that are starting to pick up the question of financing the transition. Yet, I heard a very disturbing number in the previous session where I was. What I heard that climate finance, we have heard all of 4% only going to agriculture, but somebody told in the previous panel that it dropped down to 2.5% last year. So I don't know if that's true. If that's true, that's really, really scary. So we've got to reverse this trend, and we've got to multiply and really scale up. So we're here to talk about this. I have two first esteemed speakers to actually introduce the subject and frame it, and thereafter 4 fantastic panelists to share the solutions that they've been exploring and to see how we can try and really scale this up. So I'm going to start with Dr. Naoko Ishii. She's the director at the Center for Global Commons, University of Tokyo, and many of you know her as she's also one of the commissioners of the Food Systems Economics Commission and previously served as the CEO and chairperson of the Global Environment Facility. So, Dr. Naoko Ishii, do you want to come on stage? I have to say that you have 5 minutes. Good, perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah, good enough to address this a huge question. Can you hear me? All right, 5 minutes. Yeah, very good evening to everyone. And I was maybe introduced I was even maybe tasked to introduce you that the key points of the FSEC, Food System Economics Report, which actually tell us that we need 200 to 500 billion annually to transform the food system. And it actually comes from the much bigger number that the current economic system and the current food system really cost us about 5 to 10 trillion. The cost coming from health and the environment and social. But with this 200 to 500 billion annually, that with several interventions, we can generate another 10 trillion benefits also coming from environment and health and then maybe society. But I'm also being a commissioner, which is quite responsible of this calculation. I'm actually challenging to myself, is this really the right framework to think about it? Because if we can really change that with 200 billion and change the entire food system transformation, to me it's quite a cheap stuff. And to me, the real challenge is that we have this current economic system of 100 trillion US dollars, which is really eating our health of the planet. And if we are not really able to change the way the current economic system works for the planet and the people, well, we would be in the huge trouble going forward. So to me, the real challenge is not necessarily finding 200 billion for this intervention. How we can change the entire economic system to which the food system is a very important part of. So maybe that I will reframe my question, how the current economic system of 100 trillion can really change the way it is being operated. To me, the real challenge is there are a few important economic levers in it that how to incentivize the good thing and how to penalize the bad thing. The carbon pricing is definitely one way to think about it, how to penalize the emitters or emissions, but how to actually reward the good thing like how to incorporate the full value of, let's say, natural capital. The food system is using a lot of natural capital, and currently the current system is basically taking it for granted. I mean that the nature is free to many of us. Isn't that the important time for us to think about how to take account for the full value of natural capital and find a way to incorporate into the every economic decision making, not only the food system, but for the entire activities. So I am actually a bit of reframing the question. I was asked to talk about 200 billion to 500 billion, which is the food system economic FSEC, food system economic, and the commission is talking about. And just to be also to do the justice to that report, that 200 or 500 billion comes from how to change the food diet, because food diet is a very important part of how we can eat up the planetary health, but also some rural infrastructure intervention, also how to protect the nature and restore the nature. Then also that it comes from how to provide a social safety net. Because if we do this food system transformation, many people do expect maybe food price may rise. So how to provide the safety net to the poverty, to the maybe poorest part of the society. So this and the 500, 200, 500 comes from those calculations. But I personally believe that the things we really need to do is to find a way to how to reward the good thing and how to penalize the bad thing, which may not really sit within this 200, 500 of calculation. We have to find a way to how to change the economic actually metrics of the way it works. So I'm really interested in today's panel and really want to learn from public sector, the private sector, what kind of economic system you may want to see that we are all a bit of struggling this reporting MRV obligation towards the scope 3. Does it really help you to do the right thing or not? It's only the burden to the entire value chain. Or it actually provides a good incentive for us together to do the right thing. The right thing to me, it's really do the justice to economic, environment, that the health, and actually that the society. So that is my kind of opening remarks. Sorry to deviate from what I was asked to do, but I hope that I really would like to provoke that discussion of, because you said that we are not able to find enough money or so-called funding gap. But to me, the funding gap is not the 200 billion. It's the challenge is much bigger to how to reframe the economic system. So with that, I want to give it back to you.
I'm going to use this mic. Thank you so much. This was so lively, and actually, I love it. Can I just use this mic? Because the other one I just lost. Okay. No, I love it because, you know, we were discussing earlier today with a colleague the fact that it's difficult. We always put... You know, when we introduce and talk about food system transition, we always say the food systems are broken. And we basically put the light on food systems and farmers as if, you know, you guys are responsible for what's going wrong. And actually, we were saying, no, actually, it's the way our society is working that is broken. You're right, it's the whole economic system and how we don't incentivize or disincentivize. So I really like the framing. And with that in mind, thank you so much, Naoko. We're going to basically now want to talk. You also said, Naoko, that it's important to think about a safety net, a social safety net for people if prices are going to go up. By the way, I don't think prices have to go up. We just need to repurpose subsidies and make sure that we incentivize the right things. But in any case, we need to put farmers at the center of that transition. We keep hearing that. So we're going to now hear from, let me just navigate my different things. We're going to hear from Katie Partnat-Nunn, who has actually showed to me a map of her farm before. She happens to be not only the World Farmers Organization's board member for Europe, but also a farmer and a forest owner in Finland herself. So more than anyone here, I guess, you can talk to us both about your work, how you're seeing or not seeing the disincentives today, and how you think a good process would be to make sure that we put farmers at the center of that transition. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Oh, sorry. Actually, I have the other microphone. I keep forgetting. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, perfect. Thank you so much, and thank you for the invitation to join to this event. I think it's really important to talk about the partnerships and understand each other even more. My name is Kati. I'm a farmer. I'm a forest owner in Finland. I'm also in the farmer organizations, in my national farmer organization, but also in World Farmers Organization board. But I'm also actually a senior lecturer in University of Applied Sciences, and very much working with future young farmers and future farming experts. I want to first, I didn't plan this, but as you were speaking about these needs, that's what I face. That, for example, at the moment, one of my courses, what I'm now leading, is about strategic planning of the farm. And so the young students, they are making a strategy. And for that, they have to see the operational environment, and especially what are the requirements of the markets or community or legislation. And that's one part of the transition, that the farmers know what they need to do. And that's where we need education and training. And the transition is already going on because we are changing the practices. What kind of transition is maybe needed? Maybe I can give some examples from the farm level. We should all, in food sector, in the food chain and food systems, minimize the emissions, maximize the sequestration, increase resilience, and to do this, taking into account all sustainability dimensions, so environmental, social, and economical, because without taking these all into account, it's not sustainable. And at the same time, take care of the food security, and it's quite a challenge. In farm level, it might mean different solutions depending on what kind of farm you have and where it is, because we are dealing with the nature. So it's very different compared to which part of the world your farm is. But it can be changes in energy use, for example, using more bio-based fuels or biogas or energy, increasing energy efficiency. It can be changes in cultivation or tillage practices, or whatever. It can be changes in the animal feeding practices or feeds. And a lot is done already. There is all the time progress made in farms, but actually you can't see them in the carbon calculations. So that's one issue, that we feel the blaming that you are not doing anything, but still every day in agricultural work we are changing. I can say that I started as farmer with my husband 20 years ago, and a lot we have changed so much in farming practices. Yes, and I have to highlight the profitability, because agriculture farming is an entrepreneurship. So as also Andrea Porro, our Secretary General, said, and also in my country we said, it's hard to be green if your account is on red. So you have to be profitable. Without them, it's difficult to maintain the current situation. Not to mention that you could not develop if the business is not profitable. And also, if you are changing products, there should be markets for the products. So that's also a challenge, especially to private sector, that how do we deal with the markets? And if the farmer starts to produce some new product, what not produced before other markets, and what are the partnerships? For the financing sector, we know, at least in Europe, that there are a lot of more requirements for banks and responsibility requirements, and it increases the reporting. And that's also a bit worrying from the farmer point of view. What will be the reporting requirements for farmers, and does it just, as Naoko said, does it just increase the bureaucracy and burden in the farms? In Finland, there was actually it's now at the moment going on a research on financing and profitability and financing possibilities of farmers and farms, and it says that the polarization among farms is accelerating. So there are farms which are doing quite well, but increasing number of farms which are struggling, and also it comes to the possibilities to get financing. So those who are profitable, they get more. Of course, they get more easily funding, but those who are struggling, it's more and more difficult for them to get funding. Carbon markets as well as nature value markets, they could bring new possibilities to farmers and forest owners, but there has to be an enabling policy framework with technology neutrality, and of course understanding the nature processes, what we are dealing with every day. In Finland, farmer organizations made together with main research organizations of natural resources a very ambitious climate roadmap. This is in Finnish, but we have it also the summary in English, as well as a biodiversity roadmap. And they are both really ambitious. And the main idea is that the solution is not that we get rid of agriculture and that's the solution for everything, or we cut the production of food. But we find new ways, we find more resilient, more sustainable ways, and then we calculate the costs. It should not be only on the cost of farmers, but the cost should be, we have to find a way to fund the costs and share the risks as well. And that's really valuable paper, and it gives the farmer organization a possibility to give the ball, throw the ball to other organizations, but also to create new partnerships. Yes, incentives are needed to speed up the process, but the forerunners, they should not be punished, but they should be, more encouraged. For the financing sector, the whole private sector, I ask that they have to take care of that they understand the farmers' welfare, the need for farmers' welfare, because usually farmer is the most important asset in the farm, especially when they are working alone or with the family. So farmers' welfare is crucial. It's really important that the private sector and all the stakeholders of agriculture, they understand what the farming is, what the everyday life is. So I think it's crucial to find the solutions. And we have to remember that farmers are already investing by themselves to climate change, to climate work, and to biodiversity welfare. And so we are already investing euros. This 2.5%. It's public from the public funding, but we also have farmers funding, what is already existing, but we need definitely more private funding, private partnerships, and stakeholders, and joining our forces for better future. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So I'm going to just try to recall a few of the statements that you made that actually, were really sharp and useful. I guess I loved your say when you said it's hard to be green if your account is in the red. Really like it. In an earlier panel, there was another farmer who also said something I liked, which was, if a farmer is healthy, then society is healthy. So we heard from you about being farmer-centric, meaning that in everything that we do, we need to think about how we reward for progress. And actually, Naoko has said that before. We need to also really see how we're going to channel the finance all the way to farmers. We need to think about the reporting burdens, and I think that would also echo amongst the corporates that are going to be as well on the panel very soon. And finally, create new partnerships, and that I think is definitely a red thread for everything as well as for financing. So now we're going to enter the second phase of this panel, which is, of this session, which is actually going to bring the 4 panelists on stage. So I'm going to call on Julie Green, the CSO of Olam Agri, headquartered in Singapore. Welcome, Julie. We're going to have Pete Kendane, who is Chief Technical Advisor for the Presidential Initiative on Climate Change in Sierra Leone. Pete, welcome. We're also going to have Petra Loh, who is CSO of Syngenta, headquarters in Switzerland. And last but not least, we'll have Paul Guleik, I hope I pronounced your name properly. And I have here, you're a diplomat in the Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, focusing on food systems, climate, and security. Great. So I have a question for each of you. And really, guys, we really want to keep time for you to raise any question, any comment, any suggestion you have for us to try and really scale up all of these great solutions we're going to hear about or actually explore more. So we're going to start with you, Julie. The question that I propose to share with you is how is Olam Agri, and maybe you'll say a few words about Olam Agri, investing in sustainable food systems? And how can companies like yours work with policymakers to ensure a just transition?
Okay, thank you. How's the sound? Is it good? All right. Great. So Olam Agri, we're headquartered in Singapore, but we are operating across the globe, sourcing and trading, and sometimes also farming a number of staple commodities: rice, cotton, wheat, soy, etc. And we do a lot of this also in close collaboration with a network of smallholder farmers. We're supporting about 500,000 smallholder farmers in different programs, particularly in West Africa, in India, and Southeast Asia. So how are we supporting sustainable transition? Our key focus areas in sustainability are climate, nature, and livelihoods. And I think really to the point of this this topic, three topics that are particularly at the heart of our programs on the ground are soils. First of all, keeping in mind that some 52% of agricultural land has become moderately or severely degraded, and this is getting worse and worse, very quickly. Methane emissions, it's quite interesting that at this COP there's been an increased commitment of governments and philanthropies to combat methane emissions from agriculture as well as from waste and energy through the Global Methane Pledge. But rice, for us, what's relevant there is that rice is responsible for about 8% of ag methane emissions. And then a third topic would be post-harvest loss, where about a third of food, as we know, even 40% is lost or wasted if you include from the harvest time to post-harvest and such. So some examples of what we're doing. On the rice side, because I think there was a question about financing somewhere in the brief as well. So on the rice side, we've built on programs that we've done successfully, models. You could say there were pilots of 10 to 20,000 farmers in Vietnam and Thailand that were successful through the application of laser land leveling and alternate wetting and drying and other techniques at reducing methane emissions, at reducing water use, while maintaining or even increasing farmer incomes. And we're always saying, how do we scale up pilots? Well, scaling up pilots means going beyond just our company, our group of farmers, to a national scale. And so now with GCF and Jeff, supporting with some of the grant financing, the local governments, the local banks as well that have with a mandate for specifically financing farmers and agriculture. This has brought some funding into the system. We have technical partners in this new phase of program, which goes beyond us. So technical partners, the IRRI, GIZ for delivery, and then ourselves and others for off-takers. So we've created a much bigger program that's looking at about 250,000 farmers to scale up what we know works. I think what's really important there also is having that blend of grant financing and concessional lending to support that transition. And similarly in post-harvest loss, where we've baselined losses across supply chains in 10 different supply chains, we've identified areas where those losses are happening. We've identified technologies at work. We've piloted them, and I think the next step to scale up similarly is to see how can we take these simple technologies, which are showing, they're proving that with some simple storage solutions, moisture measurement solutions, modified threshers, they can cut in half post-harvest loss from wheat and rice. We're doing that in Nigeria now. And create also an ecosystem for economic development to supply some of these materials. But again, this also requires financing from banks that is directed towards farmers. So farmers are not competing with real estate and others for that finance. So grant financing, the bank financing that's targeted at a really ground level. We support village savings and loans associations, which has been very successful at helping to support that ecosystem. And then at, of course, the higher level, and I think you've alluded to it in the earlier talk, we need mechanisms that finance not just carbon, but also nature, and that recognize that value of nature and ensuring healthy food systems.
Thank you, Julie. I actually find that really fascinating. I wonder if we are documenting all of these progresses, because we keep hearing that we're not scaling enough, that we need to go faster and quicker. Absolutely, we do. But there are so many really great examples of, here again, it's a great example of blended finance, where we find ways to de-risk capital and in order to really scale up. And I would love to actually see how much progress we've made. I think it would give a bit of a more optimistic view of what is being, we can do and how we can replicate in other places as well. But really, thank you for your insights on that. I'm going to turn to Pete now to ask if you can tell us more about the presidential initiative on climate change and the steps that Sierra Leone is taking to scale and de-risk, as I was just saying, private sector investment in sustainable food systems.
Yeah, thank you very much. The presidential initiative on climate change, renewable energy, and food security was created by the president to ensure policy coherence within these three work streams, because it used to be these ministries could work in silos to the extent that if there are interventions in one particular ministry, the others do not know about it. A case in point is if, like now, the government is intending to build mini-grids, a lot of mini-grids, but we want to ensure that some of these mini-grids target areas where there is a lot of food production, so that you could be certain that there would be less post-harvest losses because of energy availability for processing and storage and even cooling. So that's the idea behind that. So basically, we work with the ministries of ministries of agriculture, climate change and environment, as well as the Ministry of Energy. Now, with regards to how the government is de-risking investments in agriculture, the government has, as of last year, introduced some sort of soft lending from the Bank of Sierra Leone, which is the central bank. Now, there was a facility provided there for $10 million, and this facility targets medium to large-scale farmers. For us, if you are able to lend $1 million, you are large-scale in Sierra Leone. So you have to understand that context. So these big-time investors or private sector would necessarily have access to funding instead of going to the funding is at a very low interest rate, about 10%, whereas if they had gone to the to the open market, it will be 25 to 30%. So the risk is being taken over by government. In addition to that, because we know that 65% of labor is provided by women, the government is interested in ensuring that funds are made available through these schemes to private sector to bring in gender-friendly equipment, gender-friendly machinery. Because as I speak here now, it is the harvest season for rice, and one of the challenges is just threshing alone, and that is very time-consuming. It's basically done by women. So if we encourage the private sector to bring in farm machinery, de-risking their investments, then that's one way we are helping improving the lives of women and the small farmers within the country. In addition to that, government has introduced family farming credit facilities within the countryside, in the rural areas. This also is another way of ensuring that small producers, small processors have access to financing within their environment, which makes life a whole lot easier for them. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for these very concrete examples. And I must say, I liked how you said you're trying to bring ministries to work together and gave the example of Minister of Agriculture and Ministry of Energy. I actually think a lot of us in many other countries could learn from that example. That is definitely something we're not doing well enough. Hopefully, as the NDCs are being updated now, there will be a bit more cross discussion and fertilization across the different ministries. I'm going to turn to Petra now to understand what steps is Syngenta taking to invest in the future of food systems and what opportunities are there for policy support in integrating sustainability into business decision making.
I think this microphone is working.
That's perfect.
Yes. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. So I represent Syngenta, which is one of the last large-scale investors in agricultural technologies inputs. We invest about 2 billion per year. Does this work better?
Yes, that was better.
Good. Try again. No? No? Oh, I take them. Is this better now? Okay, super. This matters in communication, okay? I come from Syngenta. We are one of the last big-scale investors in innovation, and technology-wise, the sky is the limit. So it's all about digital understanding, what happens on the field, soil health. We learn from pharmaceuticals, modeling and silico design of molecules. So there is a lot we can do. If it then comes to an investments decision, then the question is there a market? Because you asked how can we integrate this, right? And the market very much has to do with what you told us before. Is this of any use in the current farming system for the farmer? And then the landscape looks very different on what investments decision you can take or you cannot take. So we are having a couple of examples where investment in sustainability and a different production method is financing itself in the current system, which, for example, is nutrient use efficiency, because the farmer can save on fertilizer and perhaps use other technologies, biostimulants, for example. It's also land restoration, where you get a loan, you get some technologies, the reward you get is more productive land again. But there are also areas where this is not self-financing, and you talked a lot about rice, for example. We have done market research. Farmers don't care for methane emission. Most smallholder farmers even don't know about it. They care for shortage of water and for labor. So if we want to integrate sustainability in our business models, we need to understand what is on the farmer's mind. And McKinsey just launched the Global Farmer Research, And interestingly, the sustainability methodology and products are being picked up because either they increase yield, or they lower the work, or they open up new revenue streams. And the one big policy idea which is probably driving a lot in the US, for example, is as part of the US Inflation Reduction Act, the 45Z investment, which is rewarding the crushers for delivering low carbon intensity corn for biofuel. And we are now, we have started with a pilot which we can scale as soon as the rules are released by the USDA. We can now reward farmers for doing cover crops, use some of our technologies to deal with the increased pesticide and disease pressure. And then farmers can actually get a reward for delivering a lower carbon intensity crops, which comes from different farming managers and maintenance of yield. So we are very hopeful of these kind of incentives in the market.
Thank you, Petra. Thanks for making this very straightforward and practical. I think it probably resonates for everyone. There has to be either a market or less work or indeed better yields. For the last panel participants, I'm going to come up with a question, and thereafter we're going to turn to you, guys, and hand the mic for any questions you may have or comments. Paul, how has the Norwegian government managed to mobilize finance and to catalyze investment partnerships? We heard about partnerships before. We know we need more partnerships, by the way, around food systems, climate and security.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me with this microphone? Okay, very good. No, I mean, first of all, we need the private sector. We need markets. That's absolutely crucial for success. And for private sector to invest, you need good government policies and plans and frameworks for that to happen, both nationally, of course, in terms of what we are doing to mobilize and to follow up on international commitments that we are making here and in the biodiversity COP and elsewhere, but also in order to mobilize funding for our development, which is where I'm coming from. Example, in Norway we have extremely high CO2 taxes, which is why we have 90% of all new cars now electric. Sold are electric. But we should maybe also have benefits for farmers and forest owners to actually contribute to the carbon sinks that are land and forest. I'm a forest owner myself, a small forest, and my minister had a good proposal recently to pay forest owners to not cut down the trees, which is basically what we are doing at the level of $300–400 million a year to work with Brazil, Indonesia, Congo and others not to cut down rainforest in order to protect the biodiversity. But at home that was felt like a lead balloon for some reason. Very strange. But in any case, I agree with previous speakers. It's wrong to blame the farmers. I mean, the amount of emissions from agriculture, yes, it's sizable, it's important. But we need the food and we need to increase food production without compromising climate and biodiversity commitments. And that's exactly what we are doing in what we call the Alliance of Champions for... Oh, sorry. Where is it now? For... Yeah. Where we are working and co-chairing with Sierra Leone, and they are a good example of a country that has good national integrated whole-of-government policies. The other co-chair is Brazil, of course, extremely important country in the not only agriculture space, farming and food, but also in terms of politically, as a chair of the G20 and with a fantastic focus on hunger and poverty during their G20 chair, which will be I think launched at the Alliance tomorrow, and which we have at the summit in Rio, which we have committed to. As far as Norway is concerned, we are pretty much maxed out on official development assistance. We are providing 1% of GDP, which is $5 billion a year, $1,000 per person. And there is no more to be gained now, especially when you have Russia invading Ukraine and Israel destroying Gaza and putting more pressure on all budgets. But we have promising results from our climate investment fund, which has actually leveraged private capital and helped us to double our climate financing to $1.5 billion a year, half of that being private. And that's something that so-called blended finance that other countries are looking at, of course, and doing as well. The challenge here again is how do you get that funding to adaptation and food security and fragile states and countries, least developed countries. That's, as you said earlier, already only 2, 3, 4% of finance is going to ag, and even less going to the least developed. So that's why we need an alliance like we have with Sierra Leone, and others are coming on board now, other Africans, other donors, to highlight the good work that is being done by countries committed at national level to the complex task of actually, both lowering emissions without compromising or threatening food production, as it says in the Paris Agreement. At the same time, of course, growing more food without compromising biodiversity and climate. And by joining and participating in the alliance, we believe that countries will be able to gain visibility and credibility for their efforts with a view to finance more, as Sierra Leone has done. 100 million has come their way recently for that Feed Salona project of the president, very important initiative. But we need the private sector. We need foundations like Bezos, who is part of our alliance, but also Gates. And we need companies like Yara, who's here today, who is providing important, crucial inputs like fertilizers, and others who provide seeds, in order to get agriculture productivity increase in Africa, for them to stop importing 100 billion to Africa each year, $100 billion worth of food, when they should be exporting $100 billion worth of food. That is a huge challenge where we need all hands on deck. I think the World Bank meetings recently were very encouraging. President Banga is committed to both climate finance, but also food security and agriculture in the work of the IDA, which we will then contribute heavily to in the next round. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I like how you actually make sure that we put food security and fighting climate change hand in hand. If I may reframe, it's not necessarily about producing more food. There are countries where really the productivity can go up a lot and food security is at threat. But overall in the world, we produce way more food than we need. We waste a third of it. And by the way, there is competition between food and feed and fuel, and that's another topic as well. But it's just this paradigm of, we've been saying for 30 years we need to produce more and more and more food, and I just want to make sure that we know that there is other things at stake, and it's often a question of inequality behind all of that, to be honest. But I would like to give some time now to all of the participants here to see if you have any comments or any questions. Nobody is allowed to look at their phones anymore. Then all of their heads come up. Anything you would like to share in terms of what you've heard that you agree, disagree with, or solutions, or are you just great?
Hi, thanks. I'm really happy I came here. This was an excellent session, and I had a longer chat with one of our businessmen in the sub-Saharan African region just last night. And what he said in reflection of some of the things that are happening here is that he's really missing out on mid-term to long-term public-private partnerships, which are really commercially oriented. And I'm just wondering if that triggers any reflections from those of you in the panel, perhaps in particular to the Sierra Leone representative.
Thank you, Bernard. Do you want to answer?
Thank you very much, Bernard, for the question. Yeah, indeed. Sierra Leone is very eager to work with international private investors as well as international donors to leverage their strength in ensuring that we de-risk the challenges facing investors. As we speak, we had a conference, some sort of donor conference in Vienna just over 6 months ago, and we were able to have to get pledges of up to 400 million of investors in the agricultural sector. So these are all ways of the government making rounds efforts to attract international investors. You know, real, as you refer to, real private sector interventions, not just government assisting in managing poverty. We don't want to manage poverty. We want to ensure that we create wealth. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Wonderful panel. I have a question on the blended finance, and maybe for Julie. I understand it's a beautiful model. When I was with the GF and really tried to do this blended finance, it's actually quite costly in terms of manpower. I mean, how to create this wonderful blended finance scheme, and each one of them takes a lot of time to create a solid or robust condition so that the blended finance does work. So my question for you or for anybody is that this blended finance, can we really scale up the solution of through the blended finance, or it remains more like a project and by project type of intervention? So each one of them remain more like an location specific, or project specific. So I'm a bit of struggling then how we can scale up this blended financing model to the level which requires us to really address that one. So without really thinking about how to do the penalize the bad and rewards the good, can we just rely on the blended finance scheme?
So the question of scalability.
Well, I'm not a banker, so I can speak from my experience with numerous projects, both from development orientation, pre-OLAM, as well as from my time in OLAM. But I think that, you know, you've said, can you take it be above the local level? And the scale at which I think there is a huge potential that can really be tapped into is still, I would say, reasonably at a local level. So taking it from those pilot projects in one district with, you know, depending on the size of your farmers, you know, it's very different obviously in the US to Brazil to Africa, but it might be a few thousand farmers, for example, to taking it to the level where it impacts the broader sector and the broader landscape. I think that absolutely there's a huge potential that we haven't yet tapped into to increase those blended finance models. And I know that, you know, I don't know anything behind the scenes, you would, but I know that there's been a lot of challenges in the initial conceptualization. And I would hope that with the examples being shared, some of that, you know, the human resources and time required to develop new ones wouldn't take so much time. But if we want to scale up to a global level, I don't think it's about having one thing that's scaled up, but rather replicating in a context-specific way a blended finance model that can work.
Maybe I'll just give you back the floor, the four panelists, if there is anything you want to add or any closing words or anything you wanted to rebound on before we may call this a day. Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, since the question was on blended or finance, and I mentioned the word, which I actually don't know exactly what it means, because I think it means many things to many different people, and they are talking about it over here, and it's a fashionable term, but in our case, I think it would mean that we are putting public taxpayer fund available through our Norfund mechanism in order to leverage investments from the private sector by, for example, de-risking or providing insurance facilities. One example, we launched a new fund with the USAID, Norway and USAID, at the World Bank meeting last month, putting in $35 million each in order to make it possible for small and medium-sized agri-businesses in Africa to gain credits and bank lending, because they are too risky, too small at the moment. Hopefully other donors are coming on board, and we aim to pass 100 million and much more for this type of fund. And there are other such funds out there. But I think this FASA fund that we launched there is very interesting, because it gives its first loss fund. That's the type of blended finance which we are part of, but also in general in the climate investment fund. We managed to double very quickly. So I think there are ways to do it, but you need good governance, good plans and projects in development finance at country level. You need something to invest in. You need markets, and you need the private sector on board. Otherwise, they must be interested for profit reasons, not only for charity.
Maybe I'm reacting to one point you made, Emmeline. Are we producing enough food too much? Are we wasting something? Should we eat differently? Well, the FAO forecast still says that the increase in meat demand is going to rise, at least in the low and middle income countries. And that is this very politically difficult debate. You might describe any consumer what to eat. So we have found a way to decarbonize, lower the emission from beef production through a feed-efficient corn. And we have launched a partnership with McDonald's publicly this week and Lopez Food, where we incentivize farmers to use a different feed to lower emissions by 5% roughly. It's a start. But there's also another element in this. The driver for this, because we talk about incentive, is actually the need of the big food companies also to reduce their Scope 3 emissions. And for a company like McDonald's, and I don't want to speak on behalf of them, but I'm making the point as a systems driver, the obligation for all of the big business to lower the Scope 3 emissions will be another interesting driver in finding ways, business models, investments that allow us to reduce emissions from the production of food.
Yeah, thank you very much. I would now just shift to something related but not quite what we've been asked for. I hear, and I keep hearing, all these hundreds of trillions, hundreds of billions being thrown around all over this place. Now, the family farmer, which accounts for most of the food produced, are not benefiting, as Kathy and Naoko has already mentioned. How do we organize ourselves in such a way that these family farmers have access to this funding? That is something that is very fundamental. Again, come to your point that you cannot go green if your account is red. So we want to, how can we do that? Because if we don't do that, then we are not able to make any headway. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for all of your insights. Thank you for sticking with us until right now. Did we want to add something, Katie? Okay, we have Gonzalo. Hey, Gonzalo, I thought you were just here to listen to us. Come here, please. I'll give you the mic. Thank you, Gonzalo, for speaking here on behalf of the Climate Champions and the Ambition Loop and many other hats that you're wearing.
Thank you so much, Emmeline. Thank you to the panelists. It was brilliant. Indeed, I was coming from a round table where the Alliance of Champions was well referred. And there was a question, like, if we bring someone from those governments here to talk about it, would they say the same? And they were like, yeah, we think so, when we heard here. So on the other room, they were waiting to really listen to what you were saying here. So you know that, well, as we come out of this fantastic event, I want to express, of course, my gratitude to the organizers, to the speakers, and also let's think about what can be next steps, right? We are definitely in an unparalleled global emergency. Looks like the world is falling apart. And then there's some other senses of hope. I always say that there's hope on the progression of renewable energy. It's hope on the progression of electric vehicles. Yesterday, someone was telling me, like, what do you think the world looks like and how things can be perceived in general? And my question to that person back was, if you were back into the moment of the Paris Agreement and someone would have asked you, imagine in 2024, how many hybrid and electric vehicles you imagine to see in the streets of Baku? I'm sure that the answer would have been 0, right? So that's just one expression of things that are going well and things that we can use just to grab as capacity of humans to really move on with positiveness. But then the other one is this. How are we going to accelerate transition on a food system that we know is totally broken? I think that we cannot do worse. And then we have the lights and the spirit of those that are doing the right thing. We're seeing definitely an incredible shift. We all have a shared responsibility, and we know that we need to take urgent action, and we all need a role to play. But also, we know that together we can go faster and further. And finance, we know, is the key topic of this question and of this COP. So in partnership with FOLU, with the World Business Council of Sustainable Development and many other partners, we have developed a set of asks and key messages, building, of course, on the food system call to action that we launched at COP28 last year, complementing the UAE Emirates Declaration on Food and Agriculture. We know that we need to connect those two topics, the topic of transforming our food and agriculture system with the topic of this COP being finance. And for that, we need all sources of finance to be reoriented and scaled up to fund resilient, sustainable, and equitable food systems. Investments, of course, we know need to increase to about $260 billion a year to help current agri-food emissions by 2030. But as well as we need to refencing dedicated and sufficient finance to address climate-related loss and damage among rural communities. So what does it mean in practice? On one side, we need governments to repurpose harmful incentives and repurpose global subsidies to agriculture and other sectors in line with the global biodiversity framework. And scale up all positive incentives for the conservation and sustainable use of natural resources. I was moved by your example, right? You're showing to the world what can be done and what should be done in every latitude. We need all financial institutions to align financial flows with the goals of the Paris Agreement and the global biodiversity framework, and move capital away from deforestation-related commodities. I tend to think, and I'm hopeful of what might be happening at this point in the G20 in Rio, and how much we will see the examples of the new finance model that is moving away from deforestation as an example that can happen in Brazil. And then we need businesses to share costs and risks across and beyond value chains to support farmers, to scale up sustainable, regenerative agroecological approaches, and adapt and build resilience to climate impacts. We know that next, in a few weeks, some of us will gather in Riyadh for the CCD. And CCD will also offer an entry point for this discussion, while offering concrete possibilities for businesses and different farmers and stakeholders that work with their hands in the ground to offer possibilities to restore degraded lands through agroecological approaches, and through that bring tools for both the Paris Agreement and the global biodiversity framework. Part of my hope is that that might be another exponential breakthrough that we might see coming from the nature-based solutions. So tomorrow on Food and Agriculture and Water Day, we're launching a report. It's called Transforming Food System for People, Nature and Climate, a food system call to action, real world action and progress, which will show that action is happening worldwide. And we hope that those examples will be relevant for more countries to take into consideration as they're enhancing their NDCs, and we need them to consider food and agriculture in the center of that progression of their NDCs. This report provides a set of illustrative examples across the food system call to action, 10 priority actions and 4 principles, and underscoring that food system transformation is possible and is already underway. We have, of course, we know a huge challenge ahead of us, but as I said, I'm hopeful that as we transform our power sector worldwide, as we are on a way to transforming our vehicle and manufacture sector worldwide, probably the next of the big breakthroughs will have to be around land use, about agriculture, about the agroecological approaches and food, putting that also in the center of the agenda of supporting those in need, fighting finally hunger and malnutrition and food insecurity. So as we know, this is an agenda that is not only helping the climate crisis to be solved, but also something that remains still as part of our common debt, that is being capable of give sustainable and nutritious food to the growing population of the world while restoring nature. And we know, and with these examples, I'm even more sure we can make it. Thank you very much.
Let's just applaud everyone and then make as much noise as the next ones. Woo! Thank you, Folu. Thank you for the organization.